Part 25. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Seong-Lang Go. Chapter 241. Just when Samael stabbed out the knife, tearing Emma's clothes apart, and when the tip of the knife came into contact with the opponent's skin, there was an empty feeling at the tip of the knife, but Samael's expression changed, and his whole person disappeared again. When he appeared on the roof of the building again, there was no one on the roof, and Emma had long since disappeared. The attack just now, was her body modification? The bodies of every 5th level ability user have been freed from the shackles of mortals. My attack just now felt a bit similar to the feeling of touching her portal. Samael looked at the missing tip of the metal dagger and thought, is it to give the vital parts of the body some spatial attributes? Samael snorted, but since you escaped, it means that my attack is not ineffective against you. The gap between ability cooldown time and nerve response makes you completely at a disadvantage when fighting me in close combat. Thinking of this, Samael said to the communicator on his wrist, did you track the signal? Sir, the other party has stopped, about 6 kilometers northwest of you. We have sent the specific coordinates to your communicator. Good. The next moment, Samael left dozens of after-images in mid-air, and his whole body moved towards the target with a high-frequency teleportation. In the blink of an eye, he had already appeared hundreds of meters away. Deep in Mount Fuji, inside a cave. The new king rested on the ground with his sword in both hands, looking at the 3 pools in front of him with a proud look on his face. Each pool emits an astonishing cold air, freezing the entire cave into an ice cave. However, no matter how shocking the cold air is, it can never penetrate within 3 feet of the new king. The new king said to the white-haired old man on the side, Daxia's fleet is about to set off. It seems that Li Anping's memory has indeed been lost, and the memory of the Black Demon King has not been completely restored. Otherwise, he would never behave as he does now. They obviously still recognized Li Anping as the so-called Dark Devil. The old man on the side nodded and said with a smile, so all his actions are invisible in my eyes. He has no brute force and cannot exert his true power at all. Among all people, he has plans for us. The threat may not be as high as the others. Are you talking about Emma, Samael, and Jane? Speaking of which, Emma seems to be no match for Samael. Do you need me to help him a little? The old man replied, no, everything is according to the plan. Although Samael has the upper hand, he can't kill Emma yet. Everything just needs to go according to the plan. But I can't wait any longer. I really want to see Li Anping as soon as possible, Xinjun said with a proud look on his face. If it weren't for the plan, I really want to have a fair fight with him. Behead him in a fair and just way. Don't worry, Xinjun, it won't be long. But in a fair fight, I'm afraid there's no chance. He may not be your opponent, but his regeneration ability is so strong that it's difficult to kill him completely with ordinary means. Let's follow the plan. While the two were talking, the whole earth suddenly shook, and then bubbles began to bubble out of the 3 pools in front of them. In the blink of an eye, the cold gradually dissipated. Not only were the 3 pools no longer cold, but they began to emit a hint of heat. The new king and the white-haired old man were not talking, they just stood there waiting. As time passed, the heat grew stronger and stronger. The temperature of the entire cave had unknowingly risen to over 30 degrees and close to 40 degrees. However, in such a hot environment, neither the new king nor the white-haired old man showed any discomfort. Not even a drop of sweat appeared. The surroundings of the new king are like an unaffected space. Neither the cold just now nor the heat now had any impact on him. Just as the temperature inside the cave is getting higher and higher. The water in the 3 pools has almost boiled. 3 streams of thought emerged from the depths of the pool. As time went by, these 3 thoughts became stronger and stronger, almost filling the entire cave. Under the pressure of 3 thoughts, Xi and Junrin still looked expressionless. The white-haired old man's expression became more and more solemn. Feeling the strangeness, dominance, and power coming from his thoughts, he finally couldn't help but said, "Are they really level 4 ability users?" Of course, Shinjun laughed excitedly. In the historical trend of thousands of years, they were all invincible existences at that time, with unparalleled abilities and unique talents. They have all reached the level of power in their respective eras. The limit that can be achieved. It was just that they were unable to reach a higher energy level due to the planetary environment at that time. With their talents, it may only take a few days after they wake up to adapt to the modern environment, break through the original realm, and reach the 5th or even 6th level. Only such people are qualified to be sunk into the pool of dreams and sleep, waiting for the promised day to arrive. Suddenly, one of the 3 thoughts grew at an astonishing speed, and in a blink of an eye, it squeezed away the other 2 thoughts around it and pressed it against the corner of the cave. Then a pale, slender hand stretched out from the pool and grabbed the edge of the pool. Xian Jun smiled and said, "I didn't expect you to be the first one to wake up. Welcome to 2000 years later." On the naval port on the east coast of Daxia. The entire port was busy at the moment. There are busy warriors everywhere, and there is a huge aircraft carrier with a length of more than 300 meters, a width of more than 50 meters, and a flight deck of 80 meters wide. This is the most powerful and one of the only 4 nuclear-powered multi-purpose aircraft carriers in Daxia, the Halong. As the core force of the Daxia Navy, it can carry various types of carrier-based aircraft to attack various aircraft, submarines, ships, and ground targets. Around the aircraft carrier, there are also 4 anti-aircraft missile cruisers, 2 destroyers, 6 anti-submarine destroyers, and 3 attack nuclear submarines. Such a powerful force constitutes the aircraft carrier fleet heading to Dongyang this time. It can be said that with the power of this aircraft carrier fleet, even without the help of ability users, it is enough to sweep across the entire Dongyang. Of course, the premise is that there is no level 5 ability user in Dongyang to confront. At this time, Li Anping stood on the flight deck of the Halong. Behind him followed Yang Guang, Audrey, and Xiao Suesu. In addition, there were more than a dozen Daxia Navy personnel. But what attracted more attention was a pink-haired, slender beauty from the snow country. It was Claudia, the Saint Queen of the Ice Castle. Under her personal insistence, Li Anping agreed to take her to Dongyang. Li Anping asked, "Claudia, what do you think of this fleet? In terms of conventional force, it is enough to push the entire Dongyang." Claudia thought for a while and said, "But it seems that there is a lack of measures to counter extraordinary force. If we encounter some special ability users, I am afraid the losses will be great." A naval officer on the side couldn't help but say, "Your Highness, the Holy Queen, the Sea Dragon is definitely not lacking in experience in countering ability users. We have a complete set of countermeasures designated for hostile ability users." "I am presumptuous." Claudia nodded and apologized. "We will know after the battle." Li Anping touched his chin. The key to the combat effectiveness of the aircraft carrier is to see the actual combat. After all, the Daxia Navy has not experienced a large-scale war for too long. Maybe this trip to Dongyang will have some small opportunities to show off. Li Anping thought so. "Captain, how long will it take?" Behind Li Anping, a middle-aged man with a serious face stepped forward and said, "In about half an hour, at the speed of the Sea Dragon, it will reach Dongyang's territorial waters tomorrow morning." Li Anping knew that the speed of an aircraft carrier was not fast, and the aircraft carrier did not rely on the hull itself to fight. And this time, the main purpose of taking the Sea Dragon there was to deter more than to have a practical effect, to reduce the resistance of Dongyang to join the Pan-Continental Alliance. In fact, up to now, in order to cause unnecessary trouble, all the news has not been announced. Whether it is Dongyang joining the Pan-Continental Alliance, the deployment of the Daxia aircraft carrier formation, and Dongyang's concessions on various interests, The signing and conclusion of all these secret treaties are only known to the top leaders of Daxia and Dongyang. The cooperative attitude and obedience of Dongyang surprised the entire Daxia top leaders, and made them feel that the possibility of a full-scale war is very small. It is really hard to believe what Dongyang has the confidence to fight against the aircraft carrier fleet. What's more, Li Anping is in charge of the aircraft carrier fleet this time. From Daxia's perspective, Li Anping alone is countless times more terrifying than the entire aircraft carrier fleet. To be continued. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiang Go. Chapter 242. There is no trace of human beings in the endless sea. Li Anping stood at the front of the flight deck of the Heilong aircraft carrier. Originally, the officials asked Li Anping to stand in the command room of the ship platform. But compared to there, Li Anping still likes to stand at the front of the aircraft carrier. The aircraft carrier's speed is about 30 knots per hour, which is equivalent to about 54 kilometers per hour. Feeling the oncoming sea breeze and looking at the vast sea, Li Anping's heart couldn't calm down. Behind him, Yang Guang stood there without leaving. As if he felt something, he lowered his head and said softly, "Sir, what can I do for you?" Li Anping shook his head. He didn't know why he always felt inexplicably irritable. It was as if something bad was about to happen, making him want to rush to Dongyang quickly. In the past days, he had never felt this way no matter what kind of enemy he faced. "Emma, is there no news yet?" Yang Guang lowered his head and said, "Since the message came yesterday, there has been no new news from Emma so far. According to the contact person in Kyoto, he has also temporarily lost contact with Emma." Really? Li Anping looked at the sea in front of him and said nothing. Emma is a level 5 ability user, and her ability is the rare space teleportation. It can be said that she has very strong survivability, just like she can survive the attack of 2 level 5 ability users in the underworld. So Li Anping was not worried about whether she would be seriously injured like Yan Bei. However, Emma didn't take the initiative to contact us, so she was obviously in some kind of trouble. It seems that things about the immortality potion are definitely not simple. Either the Divine Realm, the Dongyang government, or the Star Alliance's methods. Maybe even all three are involved. Thinking of this, Li Anping seemed to feel a little more inexplicably irritable. I saw him suddenly clenching his fists, and amazing power was transmitted to his fists. Yang Guang was the first to raise his head because he felt terrible pressure. Then came the soldiers on deck. When Li Anping stood on the bow of the ship, he had always been the focus of everyone's attention. All the soldiers couldn't help but focus on this godlike man. At this moment, Li Anping suddenly clenched his fists, which attracted everyone's attention. The next moment, the fist had completely turned into an afterimage and disappeared into the air. Li Anping just punched the sky casually. The explosion in the air and the terrifying sonic boom sounded almost at the same time. The terrifying shockwave emitted from the fist, and then directly penetrated the clouds. The clouds were pushed open by the shockwave and split into two. The huge gap in the middle revealed the color of the universe. From the flight deck, it was like a blue road opened in the sky, leading straight to Dongyang. Direction. It extends to hundreds of kilometers away. "Sir, Your Majesty," Yang Guang looked at Li Anping with fear and admiration. The other party's power seemed to have become even more unfathomable. "It's nothing, I'm just a little irritable," Li Anping said calmly. "Speed up a little and increase the speed of other ships in the fleet by 5 knots. Yang Guang said doubtfully, "But the Heilong's top speed is only 30 knots. "It doesn't matter." As he said that, Li Anping suddenly squatted down and put one hand on the flight deck. "Let me help him speed up." At this moment, Xiao Suesu, Audrey, and Claudia also rushed over because Li Anping's movements just now were too big. They thought they had been attacked. On the deck and on the ship's platform, all the soldiers couldn't help but look at Li Anping at the bow of the ship. Although I had already seen the scene where the other party stopped the tsunami by himself, but I really wanted to see it with my own eyes. The celestial phenomenon caused by the opponent's random punch still made them feel extremely shocked. Especially Captain Li Shan in the command room. As the captain of the Heilong, he has always believed that the aircraft carrier is the most powerful war weapon. A complete aircraft carrier formation definitely has the combat power to rival a level 5 ability user. But until then, seeing Li Anping's earth-shattering punch with his own eyes, he couldn't help but ask himself, as if the target of the punch just now was the sea dragon. What will be the result? The answer made him despair. He also completely understood why the patriarch of their Li family completely surrendered to Li Anping. This person is no longer invincible. Why does this kind of monster appear in this era? Not to mention the shock and size of other people on the aircraft carrier. After Li Anping pressed his right hand on the flight deck, an invisible force field gradually spread out, trying to wrap the entire aircraft carrier in the force field. When the void force field spread to the entire aircraft carrier, Li Anping exhaled, and the next moment he was shocked. He pressed his right arm violently, and the entire aircraft carrier shook, making a series of metal squeezing and collision sounds. In the command room, Captain Li Shan felt the entire aircraft carrier shake. His steps were unsteady and he almost fell to the ground. But he ignored these details and shouted loudly, "What's going on? Did you hit something?" "No, I don't know." Nothing was detected on the bottom of the ship. Just when the entire command room was confused, Yang Guang's voice came from the intercom. "Captain, Your Excellency will help the Sea Dragon accelerate about 5 knots and notify the surrounding ships to follow." What? Before Li Shan could finish expressing his surprise, he saw that Hai Long Hao started to speed up slowly. Under the influence of the void field, Li Anping's physical power directly acted on every inch of the aircraft carrier, grabbing the entire aircraft carrier like an invisible hand. Not to mention the shock and horror of Captain Li Shan. From the bow position, Claudia looked at Li Anping with a ghostly expression and shouted, "What on earth did you do? Why do I feel that the aircraft carrier is accelerating?" Because it was really true. She was so surprised that Claudia directly shouted in her native language, "Ice Castle." No one except Li Anping understood it. So only Li Anping replied, "Just speed up a little bit. I still think we should rush to Dongyang as soon as possible." After saying that, Li Anping pressed his left hand on the flight deck and said to Yang Guang, "Tell them to add another 5 knots." Before he finished speaking, the entire Sea Dragon shook again and accelerated again. Kicked up a notch. Although Li Anping still felt too slow in his heart, if he tried harder, he was afraid that something would happen to the Heilong. After all, this was not the power of the aircraft carrier itself, but the external force exerted by him. Especially in the sea, with such a huge weight and volume, the pressure of an aircraft carrier increases geometrically as the speed increases. Claudia and others on the other side only had shocked expressions on their faces. Especially Claudia. This was the first time she saw Li Anping take action with her own eyes, and she was far more unbelievable than others. What's going on with this guy? Hai Long Hao weighs at least tens of thousands of tons, has a draft of more than 10 meters, and its nuclear power can only allow it to move at a speed of 30 knots. Even if it is, Li Anping can actually increase its speed by 10 knots. On this basis it seems like it is still not trying your best. An ordinary 10,000 ton oil tanker can only reach a speed of more than 10 knots. An aircraft carrier weighing tens of thousands of tons is almost a mountain, and what Li Anping has shown now is the power to move mountains. When the Sea Dragon's speed increased to 40 knots, the two surrounding destroyers were unable to keep up, and could only use full power to hang far behind. When Hai Long Hao started sailing at a constant speed, Li Anping also retracted his hands and stepped directly on the deck with his bare feet, transmitting the power of the virtual force field to the entire aircraft carrier, maintaining a speed of 40 knots. At the current speed, the time to reach Dongyang will be reduced by a quarter. We will be able to reach Dongyanglan High at about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning tonight. At 1 o'clock that afternoon, inside an abandoned warehouse in Kyoto, Emma was sitting on a chair, constantly taking out disinfectant water and bandages from the medical kit to help bandage herself. Her hands, shoulders, back, and thighs were all covered in blood, and it looked like she was covered in blood. However, her own expression was very calm, while Hansen and Sita Takeuchi looked nervous. Especially Hansen, worried. "Sir, do you still need me to buy some medical supplies? Or let's find a clinic. It's too dangerous for you." "It's okay. We have gone through so many difficult days in the underworld, so this little injury is nothing at this point." Emma's brows couldn't help but frown. The most troublesome thing now is Samael. Who is he? Why can you keep finding us? To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Seong-Lang Go. Chapter 243. Since they met Samael last night, Emma and the others have been followed and hunted by him. If Emma had not possessed the ability of space teleportation, they would have been killed or captured. Teleportation, especially Samael's teleportation at the 5th energy level, is a very troublesome and annoying ability for anyone, even Emma. According to Emma's observations during this period, Samael can teleport up to 10 times in a second on average. In frontal close combat, Emma is completely passive and it is very difficult to dodge the opponent's attack. During this period of time when she was being hunted, she also thought about it. If she wanted to defeat or even kill Samael, she had to open up the distance and launch a super large-scale attack with the portal. But there were also problems with this. First, it was difficult for her to catch the opponent's trace in advance. Second, Samael's teleportation distance was about 30 to 50 meters, which means that he could cross a distance of up to 500 meters in 1 second. Super long-range attacks also have great requirements for attack speed and range. Third, they are now in Kyoto. Once a large-scale attack is launched, there will probably be tens of millions of casualties. It is because it is difficult to defeat the opponent in both close combat and long-range combat. So Emma has been running away passively during this period. But looking at her constantly injured body, Emma knows that if she continues to run like this, she will only be slowly exhausted by the opponent. After all, her long-distance space transmission, unless the coordinates are set in advance, must be within sight, and too far away or invisible positions will cause uncertainty in transmission and cause danger. But after continuous transmission like this, Samael can catch up at the fastest speed every time. We must find out how he knows our whereabouts. Emma thought of this. But her brows kept frowning. This kind of tracking, she had thought of it as early as when Samael appeared for the 3rd time, but no matter how she and Hansen paid attention and checked the bodies of the 3 people, they could not find any reason for being tracked. If you really can't find it, you can only do this. Next, Emma set a space coordinate on the spot so that she can come back here at any time. She quickly rushed towards the other person, and kept talking to Hansen. She wanted to find out whether Samael was following her or Takeuchi Aoda. If Samael was following her, then she would rush at full speed without any burden and compete with Samael in endurance. Hansen took Takeuchi Aoda back to Daxia. If Samael was following Takeuchi Aoda, then she could use Takeuchi Aoda as bait and make arrangements in advance to ambush Samael. Emma passed through several portals in succession and appeared several kilometers away. Originally, her movement speed was very fast. But Samael, with his high-frequency teleportation, was not slower than her. Especially since Samael no longer teleported directly in the sky, but moved between buildings and streets, it was difficult for Emma to sense his presence in advance. This made his sneak attack more dangerous and more concealed. Just as Emma opened the portal again and wanted to walk in, a metal dagger suddenly appeared on her vest. Unfortunately, the metal dagger only brought out a splash of blood. Emma had stepped into the portal desperately. "How long can you hold on? I can't even warm up here," Samar sneered. "Send her location." Then Samar looked at the information on the communicator, and the next moment, the whole person disappeared again. The two chased and fled. Emma went alone, no longer had to worry about Takuchi Kinta, an ordinary person, so that at this moment, both of them had used full speed, and in a blink of an eye, they had crossed most of Kyoto. But Samar finally caught up with the other party before Emma opened the next portal. The next second, countless blood flowers opened on Emma, but Emma didn't care. Using all her abilities, she saw a portal with Emma's feet as the center, and in a blink of an eye, it expanded into a huge black plane with a radius of hundreds of meters. The entire black plane was a huge portal, from bottom to top. It was going to cover Samar completely. Too slow. The speed of the portal was indeed too slow for Samael, and it was enough for him to leave 3 wounds on Emma's stomach, back, and arms before he could dodge away. However, this time, the portal took Emma away, leaving Samael behind. However, Samael just sneered, looked at the content on the communicator, and disappeared again, chasing in the direction of Emma. Chasing again and again, getting injured again and again. Whether it was the speed of expansion or the speed of movement, the portal could not keep up with Samael's instant movement. The only threat was the portal that Emma opened halfway, that is, the crack in time and space. This indestructible substance, even Samael had to be careful to deal with it. Every sudden appearance could temporarily force Samael back. But it was extremely difficult to hit the opponent. All this put Emma at an absolute disadvantage. She bled more and more, and her mind energy was consumed a lot. If not all the vital parts of her body had the properties of a space gate, which could render physical attacks ineffective, her current situation would probably be 10 times worse. Emma couldn't help but feel a little regretful. She thought she was foolproof when she came to Kyoto for the investigation this time, so in order to be flexible, she didn't leave the location coordinates in Daxia. After all, she could only locate one place. If she had known to leave a coordinate in Daxia earlier, there would be no need to go through so much trouble. I saw another super large portal, and Samael dodged the coverage of the portal and watched Emma leave. Looking at the information sent on the communicator, this time the other party actually returned to dozens of kilometers away. But Samael was no longer surprised. He knew that the other party had some kind of technology similar to the return gate, which could set a coordinate when passing by and return there afterwards. This is also a way for the other party to teleport over a long distance. It is precisely by relying on this method to suddenly open the distance. Only then can he temporarily escape Samael's pursuit and get a chance to breathe. A voice came from the communicator, "Sir, don't worry about chasing Takuchi Kinta. It seems that they have separated." "It doesn't matter," Samael said confidently. "After I catch this woman, I will ask her about it from her body." Time has come tonight in a blink of an eye. When Emma was still fighting with Samael, Li Anping was standing on the flight deck, looking up at the starry sky over the sea. Perhaps because there is not so much light pollution in the city, the night sky over the sea is particularly bright. With the endless sea, it gives people a particularly lonely and deserted feeling. But in such a quiet environment, Li Anping's heart could not calm down, but was more anxious than during the day. There is something. Li Anping touched his chin, feeling the source of his inner anxiety, and thought to himself, "I feel that there is something annoying in Dongyang." Just then, Xiao Sueso came behind Li Anping with a lunch box. "Sir, you haven't had dinner yet?" "This is the midnight snack I asked the kitchen to prepare. Would you like to have some?" "No thanks," Li Anping refused and asked, "Xiao Suesu, what time is it now? How long will it take to get to Dongyang?" After hearing Li Anping's refusal, Xiao Suesu showed a hint of disappointment on her face. After hearing Li Enping's inquiry about the time, she immediately looked at her watch and said, "Sir, it's already 12:30 in the morning. I asked before I came, and there are about 2 hours of flight time." Li Enping nodded and said nothing. Xiao Suesu stood behind him, staring at Li Enping's back in a daze. It was not until a few minutes later that Yang Guang trotted over and said, "Sir, a large number of Dongyang warships were found more than 100 kilometers away. The captain asked me to ask for your opinion." "Are you here?" Li Enping turned and looked at Yang Guang and said, "Why ask for my opinion? Let him do it, as long as those warships have any tendency to attack, destroy them all." "Yes." A few minutes later, the speed of the Heilong aircraft carrier gradually slowed down, because the fleet formation change caused by Li Enping's acceleration was recalibrated. At the same time, a new model of reconnaissance aircraft took off from the flight deck and flew towards a location 100 kilometers away. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 244. Mount Fuji, in an underground cave. The 3 pools that were originally boiling had already returned to calm. An old man was sitting cross-legged on the ground calmly. His hair and beard were very long, dragging directly on the ground. He looks very old, but his skin is very delicate, as soft as a baby. The strangest thing was that a flesh-colored tube protruded from the ground and was inserted into the back of his head. The old man closed his eyes, his face constantly showing various intoxicating looks. "I saw it, I felt it." He took a deep breath. The entire situation in Dongyang. The wild beasts and spirit bodies are still in Kyoto. The woman named Emma is dying. The religion of truth. There was a conflict with the people from the imaginary number agency, and they were all chasing the spirits. Xinjun laughed with satisfaction on the side. "Leader, can you activate your ability?" The old man known as the leader opened his eyes and showed a ferocious, sinister smile, which was in sharp contrast to his previous kind look. "Of course. With my current 5th level power, plus this under special circumstances, my abilities can be activated throughout Dongyang without reservation." "Then let's help the fleet first. It's not good for Li Enping to join the game too early." "Understood." The old man grinned, and the next moment, a strange fluctuation had spread to the Dongyang fleet. "Then, leader, you just need to act according to the plan." After saying that, the new king looked at the 2 people beside him. At this time, there were a total of Shan people standing next to him, one of whom was the blind old man who had been discussing plans with him before. Among the other 2 people, one was a young man wearing a white uniform, although he looked a little thin. But there is a unique aura of nobility in his eyebrows, like the king of gods who dominates the world. The last person was a middle-aged man. Compared with the others next to him, he looked like an ordinary office worker with a bald head and a big belly. He also wears the same white uniform as the youth. At this moment he was squatting on the ground. "Don't know what to look at?" Xi and June glanced at the 2 of them and asked, "Doctor, can you feel the existence of the formation?" The bald, fat middle-aged man pressed his hand on the ground, and a blue light that was difficult to distinguish with the naked eye lit up between his palm and the ground. He smiled and said, "I didn't expect that the formation I laid out 70 years ago could actually be preserved to this day." Suddenly, a trace of surprise appeared on the corner of his mouth. "Oh? I didn't expect that you could perfect the formation to this extent." The blind old man on the side said proudly, "This is natural. Although the phase matrix is your unique ability, we are constantly improving the environment of Kyoto and Mount Fuji based on the information you left. Now your phase matrix, there should be no problem." The doctor smiled and stood up. "There is basically no problem, but if you can wait a few days until I reach the 5th energy level, I will be more confident." "There is no time." Xinjun frowned and said, "The phase matrix only needs to fulfill the most basic requirements." After saying this, he looked at everyone present again and laughed. "Everything is ready. Gentlemen, next, let the whole world feel the long-lost fear. Leader, you and Mulao stay here to continue your plan. The Emperor and I went directly to Kyoto to contact the candidates. Doctor, please activate the phase matrix as planned. By the way, give me and the Emperor a ride by the way. The doctor smiled and said, please. He snapped his fingers, and then the new king and the young man known as the Emperor walked towards the outside of the cave. But with every step they took, their figures became fainter and fainter, until they finally disappeared. After Emma left alone, Hansen waited for more than a minute until he received the message from Emma through the communicator. He quickly grabbed Sita Takuchi and rushed out of the abandoned warehouse. Sita Takuchi, who was being pulled by Hansen, shouted, "What are you doing? Aren't you waiting for Emma?" "My lord has already lured Samael away." When he said this, Hansen's face was full of grimness. Takuchi, Sita said anxiously, "Then isn't it dangerous for her to be alone?" "No, it will be easier for her without us as a burden beside you. But for her safety, we must seize the time to escape. In order to attract Samael's attention and save him from finding us, you must not. We will try our best to escape. Only when we completely escape to a safe location can we let you have no worries." The two of them walked in tandem. Hansen grabbed Takuchi Sita's hand and ran quickly towards the street. "But that's where it's considered safe." Hansen was also thinking about this problem. With Samael's strength, ordinary safety points are meaningless. Either return to Daxia, or find a place that Samael will never find. At our speed, it is impossible to return to Daxia. We must find a place where Samael will never be found. As the two of them were running fast on the street, a voice suddenly shouted towards them. "Kingta, why are you here?" They saw a feminine-looking man running towards them quickly. When Hansen saw him, he frowned and clenched his right fist, forming a purple halo. Seeing that Hansen was about to activate his ability, Sita Takuchi quickly stopped him and shouted, "Don't do it, that's my good friend." "Friend?" Hansen looked at the feminine man with a wary look, and asked doubtfully, "Is your friend also an ability person?" From Hansen's feeling, there was clearly a thought energy in the other person's body, which was probably the third ability. Level. Energy person. Takuchi Sita looked at the other party in disbelief. 1. Are you an ability person? Chiba frowned. "Kingta, who is he? Do you know that after you disappeared, Ihara and I have been looking for you all day and night? You won't believe it if you tell me." Hansen on the side saw that the two people were chatting, and became a little impatient. "I also saw that several passers-by around the street seemed to have been attracted by the actions of the two people just now. So he said, there is no time to talk so much, we have to leave quickly." After saying that, he was about to pull Sita Takuchi forward, but he didn't know that the figure in front of him flashed, and Kinyi had already stopped in front of him. "Who are you? Why are you dragging Kingta with you?" Hansen glanced at Chiba impatiently, rolled up a purple light with his right hand and shot it towards the opponent, shouting, "Get away! Man at the top of the food chain." Author, Seong Lango. Chapter 245. Bang! The power turned into purple light bullets and shot directly from Hansen's fist. Kinyi's expression changed, and he put his hands on his chest. Although his hands were full of thought energy, he was still pushed away by 5 or 6 meters by this force. "You bastard!" Chiba yelled angrily and was about to take action. Sita Takuchi shouted, "Don't do it! He wants to protect me. We are being hunted." Pursued, Kinyi shook his painful hands and glanced at Hansen with an unpleasant expression. After all, he chose to believe his friend and asked, "What's going on?" "There's no time." After saying that, Hansen grabbed Sita Takuchi again and started running. Takuchi Sita said to Chiba-ichi, "Let's talk while walking." Chiba sighed and followed the two of them, listening to what Sita Takuchi said. A few minutes later, the three of them got on the subway. After listening to Takuchi Sita's brief explanation, Chiba frowned and said, I see, is there a person with abilities chasing you? A woman named Emma is temporarily helping you. Lure away the pursuers. Yes, Takuchi Sita nodded and said, the person who is chasing me is called Samael. His ability is teleportation. He is very difficult to deal with, so we want to find a place to hide temporarily. According to Hansen, their support will arrive in Kyoto before dawn. Then there will be no fear of pursuit. Hansen suddenly looked at Kanyi in confusion and said, speaking of which, it seems a bit too coincidental that you met us at this time, right? Takuchi Sita persuaded, Hansen, are you doubting Chiba? Don't worry, he is my best friend. There is absolutely no way he will betray us. No, I think it's better to explain this point clearly. Looking at Sita Takuchi's surprised eyes, Chiba said calmly, in this case, basic trust is the prerequisite for everything, so I'll explain it anyway. Just give it a try. Hansen on the side had actually lost half of his guard, because from the exchange just now, the other party not only had no idea about the Annihilation Abyss, the Void Walker Samael. Even level 5 ability users. Even Daxia Lonke only knows a rough idea. Therefore, Hansen judged that the other party should be the kind of guy who accidentally awakened his ability and had been careful to hide himself without entering the world of ability users. Chiba pointed to his nose and explained, my ability is related to smell. I can intuitively see all the remaining smells in the air and distinguish various smells. I came from King Tai's home, chasing his scent all the way. Hansen asked again, is there something wrong here? We have carried out space teleportation a lot of times. Can you also chase us here based on the smell? Kanyi shrugged and said, originally, I was also curious about how your scent faded and appeared. If it was space teleportation, it would make sense. Let me explain again, although I said I found you based on smell. But my ability is not the normal sense of smell, and it does not require smelling. But it is similar to more intuitive seeing. Wherever you pass by, I can see the scent you leave behind. And based on its form and concentration, we can judge the time you leave. Especially since you stayed in that warehouse for a while longer, so even though it took me a little longer, I still found you. Hansen nodded, temporarily expressing his approval. Takuchi Sita looked at Chiba Kazuo in surprise. He never imagined that his good friend was actually an ability user. Suddenly, he seemed to think of something, and asked Chiba, Chiba, you just said that Ihara is also looking for me, is it him? Chiba nodded, yes, Ihara is also an Esper. To be honest, when we first arrived in the dormitory, we were both surprised and doubted whose arrangement it was. We even thought that you might also be an Esper. But afterwards multiple investigations have shown that this is just a coincidence. Really? In the end, I was the only one who was kept in the dark. Takuchi Sita smiled bitterly, then what is Ihara's ability? It's better to wait until he comes to tell you this. After saying that, Chiba Shinichi looked at Hansen again, speaking of which, I still have some questions to ask this Mr. Hansen. Hansen said directly, my ability is power conversion, which is enough to turn the power of the body into a substantial existence. I see. Kanyi nodded and continued, but I still have some questions. I have also imagined a person with the so-called teleportation ability before. According to you, this teleportation ability is called Samael. Whether it is consumption, cooling, or distance, it is very superior. This teleportation ability is extremely threatening when used for assassinations and sneak attacks. Ordinary armed forces, no matter how many people are there, are meaningless. Are you sure your support can really work? Hansen smiled broadly, as if he was laughing at this question, and at the same time he seemed to be sighing. Seeing Kanyi's face flashing again, he slowly explained, I can only tell you that our boss will rush to Kyoto before dawn. In front of him, even Samael's strength it would be meaningless to increase it 10 times more. Because of the confidentiality agreement between Donjiang's senior management and Daxia, Hansen did not tell the other party specific things, but the confidence revealed in his words could even be felt by Sita Takuchi beside him. Hansen continued, all in all, as long as we survive the rest of the night and wait for our boss to come over. Next, a group of 3 people took the subway and got off the subway at a location close to the city center. As soon as they got off the subway and onto the platform, they saw a tall, handsome man waving to them. Chibukazue waved to the other party, it's Ihara, let's go there. However, Hansen on the side stopped him and said coldly, the situation is a bit wrong. After listening to Hansen's words, Chiba-yi and Takuchi Sita looked around and noticed something was wrong. There were only a few people on the entire platform, but they all looked at them from time to time. Moreover, the expressions of these people are also very strange, just like puppets, with pale faces. On the other side, Ihara Sonmi walked over, when he walked in front of the 3 people. Chiba asked confused, Ihara, are you okay? At this time, Ihara Sonmi's mouth was slightly open, and his eyes were staring at the 3 of them, as if he was a fool. Be careful, he doesn't look right. The next moment Hansen finished these words. Ihara Sonmi had already rushed forward. Not only him, but the surrounding crowd also roared and rushed towards them, looking as if they had some deep hatred against them. They are under control, leave quickly. Hansen's fists flashed with purple light and pushed the crowd away. He took Sita Takuchi and Chiba-yi and left. The 2 struggled for a while, but couldn't break free from Hansen's hand. Ihara is still there. We can't just leave. However, Hansen held on to the 2 of them and rushed up the stairs of the subway platform in a few steps to the upper floor. Wherever he passed, the crowds were bounced away by the purple light on his body. He said coldly, don't be impulsive. Your friend must be controlled by someone, and you can't help him if you stay. But just when he rushed out of the corridor, a strong man wearing armor and carrying a giant sword rushed over. The huge force directly hit him, knocking the 3 of them away sideways, and the force was the greatest. Hansen spat out a mouthful of blood in mid-air. He fell to the ground and couldn't get up for a long time. The 3 of them looked around. They were surrounded by more than a dozen people wearing armor, like medieval knights. What the 3 of them didn't know was that these people were members of the Knights Templar, one of the most violent organizations under the Order of Truth. The armor on them looks crude and backward, but it is powered armor made by the Codex country using cutting-edge technology, which can greatly increase the user's strength, speed, and endurance. Who are you? Why are you attacking us? The knights ignored the 3 people's questions. The leader of the knights, about 2 meters tall, his thick arms are almost the same as the torso of an ordinary person. He is the person in charge of this Dongyang operation, the deputy leader of the Knights Templar, one of the 5th level ability users of the Order of Truth, and Robert I. Dacron, who holds the title of God's Judge. He just knocked Hansen away easily. Crane asked the men on the side, how is the situation down there? It's a ghoul. I'm afraid it's someone from the imaginary number agency. Crane snorted coldly, do these dirty bastards want to spread the virus to the east? I'm afraid it's an artificial product based on the information about humans and monsters. It was probably used this time just for testing and collecting data. Crane waved his hand, purify them. As you command, my lord. Next, I saw several knights rushing down, and soon there were roars and the sound of sharp blades cutting flesh from the stairs. From beginning to end, they ignored the 3 Hansens. Takuchi Sita said anxiously, what are you going to do? My friend is still down there. Crane didn't bother to explain to the 3 of them that people infected with the virus newly developed by the imaginary number agency were absolutely incurable. In his opinion, this eastern land was full of heretics who could be punished by being burned at the stake. If it weren't for the repeated restraints of the Grand Leader, he wouldn't mind starting a massacre in Kyoto. So when faced with Takuchi Sita's questioning, he just waved his hand and said, "Take him away, and the other two will be executed on the spot." Above the East China Sea, an unmanned reconnaissance aircraft flew across the night sky, flying towards the Dongyang fleet in the distance. The special camera kept taking pictures of the huge army on the sea, but it could not find that the entire fleet was in a strange atmosphere. Suddenly, there was a flash of fire on the deck of a destroyer. The unmanned reconnaissance drone had been blown up by a missile and became a firework in the night sky. 100 kilometers away, Li Enping was still standing at the bow of the ship. Yang Guang trotted over again behind him and said, "Sir, the reconnaissance plane we sent was shot down. They also sent a message." "Oh, what information?" Li Enping looked calm, as if the distant army could not trouble him at all. But only he himself knew that the unexplained anxiety was getting more and more serious. Yang Guang said softly, "They asked us to stop the ship immediately and hand over all control of the fleet. We will be inspected. Only after the inspection confirms that there is no danger, will we be allowed to enter Dongyang." Li Enping said casually, "What are you asking me for? I wiped them all out. Tell Li Shan to show me the power of the fleet." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the Top of the Food Chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 246. Take him away and execute the other two on the spot. Seeing a few knights walking over, Chiba Kazuo and Takuchi Sita were stunned. The power the other party inadvertently displayed, the unconcealed cruelty and coldness, and the thought energy piercing them like the tip of a knife, both of them were sweating coldly, and they didn't dare to make the slightest move to resist. This is the difference between ordinary people and soldiers. Even though Qin Yi was an ability user, he had not gone through countless life and death battles. Compared with these knights, one look from the other side was enough to make him collapse. Only Hansen stumbled to his feet, purple light emerging from his hands, as if he wanted to resist. Seeing this, Kron laughed ferociously and kicked Hansen directly in the chest. He didn't know how many stubborn heretics he had executed. Hansen's behavior in front of him didn't attract his attention at all. With a bang, Hansen was directly pushed into the wall by this kick. He felt as if his ribs were completely broken, and blood foam came out of his mouth in large mouthfuls. The next moment, Crane looked at Qin Yi and said coldly, "Why are you still standing there?" Qin Yi felt as if his heart had stopped beating at this moment, and there was no thought of resistance in his heart. Strong pressure pressed on his back like a mountain. At this moment, a series of screams suddenly came from the subway platform downstairs. They were definitely not the sounds of those ghouls. The members of the Knights Templar present knew it very well, because those screams were completely shouted out by their companions who were going down. The knights stopped moving and all looked at the stairs, where the countless screams came from. It seems that some terrible biological drug has come out. Under everyone's attention, at the top of the stairs, a foreign woman with long black hair walked up the stairs. The woman was about 30 years old. Wearing a cool OL uniform, he looks full of mature charm. Ignoring Kron's hostile gaze, the woman said calmly, "I'm afraid you can't do this. The Federation has been authorized by the Dongyang government, and Chiba Kazuo and Takuchi Sita will be handed over to us." Imaginary number mechanism, you bastards, every drop of blood in your veins makes me feel sick. As he said this, Kron pulled out the giant sword behind him. The sword was 1.5 meters long. When Kron tightened his grip on the hilt, the saw chain on the sword blade began to rotate at high speed. "If the Dongyang government knew that you were experimenting with new biochemical weapons here, I'm afraid they wouldn't approve this matter." Although his face was full of hatred and hostility, he was fully alert and had no intention of underestimating the enemy. Because I'm afraid he was the only one present who knew how terrifying the woman in front of him was. Both are 5th level ability users, and the opponent's strength is enough to rank among the top 3 in the imaginary number mechanism. Crane kept telling himself that the most important thing now was to pick up the person designated by the Grand Leader. Try not to get entangled with the other person. Those people downstairs are all the work of your Knights Templar. I just can't stand it, so I just killed your men. You are really good at talking, Crane sneered. Jane, I can let you go today, but you can't take him away. He is the person designated by the Grand Commander. Do you want to cause a war between the two countries? Jane smiled sarcastically and said, haha, I'm just afraid that your code country won't dare. As the atmosphere between the two became more and more intense, the knights present also became nervous. They all drew out their chainsaws and swords, and slowly surrounded the woman named Jane. Jane just stood there quietly, her eyes on him. From beginning to end it was just Kron. Kron also waved his hand and ordered, you all get out of the way and don't get close to her. The knights were granted amnesty, so how could they interfere in the battle of level 5 ability users? Previously they had just bitten the bullet, but now after hearing Crane's order, they hurriedly retreated towards the surroundings. Crane looked at Jane, and his voice was as cold as the Arctic wind. Jane, let me say it one last time, I will never let him go. If you are not willing, just fight with me here. After saying this, afterwards, the mental energy from Kron's body surged out wildly and rushed in the direction of Jane. Jane didn't speak, but the energy of thought surged out of her body. Obviously, this was her answer. Both sides are the top ability users in the Western continent. This is not even the first time they have fought each other. They know the abilities of the other party thoroughly. Once they fight, it will probably be a brutal and unusual battle. The knights all around retreated further and further away. Chibayi and Takuchi Sita also took this opportunity to help Hansen out from the wall. At this time, no one cared about them doing this. But just as the knights around him slowly retreated, one of them suddenly felt that he had bumped into someone. When he looked back, he saw a Dongyang man wearing a samurai uniform looking helplessly. What's going on? There was no one here just now. Who are you? How did you get in? Before a series of questions could be asked, a samurai sword had already brought a white sword and inserted it directly into his chest. The power armor was directly pierced like paper armor. Xi and Jun said helplessly, why do you want to come to me? Kron watched his knight fall to the ground, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and he threw the chainsaw sword in his hand towards the new king who suddenly appeared. The sword flew out of his hand, making a huge sound, and turned into a black lightning in the air, about to pierce the new king in front of him. But the new king did not move. He knew that this sword could never hurt him. Because the strongest martial artist in history was standing next to him. The young man in white uniform, who was called the Emperor by the new king, stretched out his hand to grab the chainsaw sword flying in the air. In the surprised eyes of everyone, the young man easily grabbed the chainsaw with one hand. The huge chainsaw sword was like a ferocious dragon, but the young man stretched out his palm like Buddha and grabbed the dragon in his hand. And Kron's eyes moved even more. He saw it very clearly. Although it looked like just a grab, the young man had just tapped the blade of the chainsaw sword more than a dozen times. Each time seemed to be just right, tapping the weakest part of the sword, slowing down the speed and impact of the sword again and again. Kron knew clearly how much power he had just thrown casually. His ability was called the Son of the Earth. As long as his feet did not leave the ground, he could use the power of the rotation of the planet under his feet to exert infinite power. His throw just now was almost equivalent to throwing a container truck over, and the opponent was able to take it calmly with a series of magical skills. The new monarch watched the emperor grab the chainsaw sword in his hand and said to Kron, "Don't be nervous, your opponent is not me." Then, regardless of the reactions of the people around him, he said directly, "Doctor, through the phase matrix, I should not be discovered by them, right? Just as everyone was wondering who he was talking to, a man's voice came from the space. Voices came from all directions, like a broadcast. Sorry, I haven't operated it for more than 70 years, and I seem to be a little rusty. Shinjun pulled the samurai sword out of the knight's belly, and shook it gently to get rid of the blood on the blade. After hearing the doctor's answer, the corners of his mouth curled up. I think you want to test my strength as the leader of this generation of God's domain. No more voices came, as if the person called the doctor acquiesced. Shinjun said lightly, "That's good, then let's start directly, doctor." After Shinjun finished speaking, the whole space seemed to shake. No one except Shinjun and the Emperor knew that this shock was felt by everyone in Kyoto. The next moment, everyone felt that their bodies seemed to be torn into pieces, and waves of tearing sensations were transmitted to their brains. Everything around them was like colorful pieces of paper, forcibly kneaded together. The feeling of sadness came quickly and went quickly. When everyone reacted, they found that their bodies were completely normal. But the scene in front of them had changed drastically. Takeuchi Aoda, Chiba Ichi and Hansen all looked at the forest in front of them in disbelief. In the dense forest, there were various human buildings, just like the natural environment was forcibly embedded in a city. Jane and Kron had disappeared, and only those ordinary knights were standing around them, staring at the three of them. Kron frowned and looked around. This was the location of a square. The square was surrounded by dense forests. There were only him and the young man in white on the whole square. Kron asked with a cold face, "Where is this? Where are the others?" The Emperor didn't care about the other party's anger at all, just waved to Kron and said, "Beat me, I will tell you." Only in front of Jane, the scene did not change at all, but the members of the Knights just now, as well as Takeuchi Aoda and his group, had disappeared. The woman, who had been expressionless since she appeared, finally showed a look of doubt at this moment, and asked the only one left in front of her, "Shinjun, some kind of spatial ability? Where did you move them?" "Whatever you want to think." Shinjun looked at Jane as if he was looking at a dead person, which made Jane very uncomfortable. She said, "It seems that you do this because you think you can deal with me by yourself. I will let you know how wrong you are." But Shinjun only took a second to let her know who was wrong. To be continued. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xionglang Guo. Chapter 247. Above the East China Sea, dozens of fighter jets streaked across the sky, pouring countless ammunition onto the heads of the Dongyang fleet on the sea. The two sides have been exchanging fire for more than 2 hours. It is better to say that it is a firefight, but it is better to say that the fighter jets on the aircraft carrier are constantly attacking the Dongyang fleet from a high position. But even in this case, the Dongyang fleet had no intention of giving up and showed an outrageous tenacity. Every bullet, every anti-aircraft bomb, and every missile they fired seemed to be blessed by the gods, causing huge damage to the aircraft carrier's fighter formation. In short, it is the navy on the Dongyang fleet, as if everyone is possessed by Rambo. The accuracy of the attack, the movement of the ships, the wisdom of the battle, and even now, after the war started, and after more than 1/3 of the number of personnel was reduced, there is still no sign of collapse. In the command room of the aircraft carrier, Captain Li Shan originally thought this was a simple ravage, but now, after resisting for 2 hours, the little white rabbit actually braved the fire and was about to rush in front of the lion. The battleships in Dongyang have already brought the aircraft carrier formation under their guns. "Damn it, are these Dongyang people crazy?" Li Shan slapped his palm on the operating table. Just now, 2 more fighter jets were hit by the opponent's anti-aircraft artillery. Including the previous losses, more than 15 fighter jets have been reduced, which is absolutely impossible in normal times. The losses in this battle were so great that Li Shan was removed from the captain's position. Yang Guang on the side said, I'm afraid some kind of ability person has influenced them with unknown abilities. Ability? Is that possible? Li Shan stared at Yang Guang, his eyes bloodshot. I don't know, I'm just guessing. After saying that, he said worriedly, 2 hours have almost passed, and I'm very impatient to wait. How long do you think it will take before this battle can be ended? It will take at least 3 hours. That is more than 70% of the combat strength of the entire Dongyang Navy. There are 10 battleships alone. How can it be solved so quickly? While saying this, more than 30 kilometers away, the main gun muzzles of the battleships Dongyang and Daxia each lit up. A series of explosions occurred on the sea, and large areas of small and medium-sized battleships were sunk. As for the fighter jets, some were hovering over the Dongyang fleet and slanting their firepower, while others were returning to the aircraft carrier to replenish ammunition. Just as the battle in the East China Sea was happening, the entire Dongyang mainland had already sounded the alarm. First, the news of Daxia's invasion spread like wildfire, and the Dongyang government immediately issued a statement condemning Daxia's invasion. Daxia also immediately displayed the prepared evidence and documents, indicating that Dongyang had unilaterally broken its promise. Not to mention the bickering between the two parties, the changes in Kyoto have also attracted global attention. The huge city is covered by countless forests and vegetation. Mount Fuji suddenly appears in the center of Kyoto City. The buildings that originally belonged to the city center all appeared on Mount Fuji. Kyoto now looks like the area around Mount Fuji and Kyoto are overlapped and kneaded together, but they fit together perfectly. This is what God's domain spent 70 years on. The home court built for the final plan is one of the sources of confidence for the new team to win. In a clearing in the woods, with a concrete road beneath their feet, Takuchi Sita and Chiba worked together to support Hansen, who was seriously injured. All around them were knights of the Templar Order. These knights were holding chainsaws and swords and were approaching the three of them little by little. One of them shouted, "Catch them first. Then go find the deputy commander." Just when the knights around him were about to rush forward, a wolf howl suddenly sounded from all around, and Sita Takuchi looked in surprise. Those monsters that looked like wolves, with grey flames burning all over their bodies, rushed out, and those monsters bit directly at the knights around them. These knights were unable to notice the attacks of the monsters at all. They only realized that something was attacking them when their limbs were bitten off and torn into 2 pieces. What's going on? Something is attacking us. The open space instantly turned into a bloody killing field, with organs, bones, and fragments of flesh and blood scattered all over the ground. While Takuchi Sita was looking at all this stupidly, one of the monsters turned its attention to him. "Let's go. Run away." After Sita Takuchi finished speaking, Chibaichi on the other side, although he couldn't see the monster, reacted and pulled Hansen with Sita Takuchi and ran deep into the woods. But before they could run far away, the whole ground shook violently, knocking the 3 of them to the ground. Fortunately, the 3 of them immediately rolled to their feet and continued to escape. What's going on? Is it an earthquake? I don't know, but let's run away now. Takuchi Sita looked back and was immediately startled. Dozens of wolf-shaped monsters were chasing them. On the square, 2 figures were moving at high speed, and from time to time there would be 1 or 2 loud noises from all around them. The shock waves from the collision of their fists and feet would directly set off waves of hurricanes all around. The more they fought, the more shocked Kron felt. The fighting power of the young man in front of him had completely exceeded his imagination. His ability, Son of the Earth, is that when his feet land on the ground, he can convert part of the power of the rotation of the planet under his feet into his own physical power. But every time his feet landed on the ground, the opponent would dodge his attack. Once 1 foot left the ground, the young man's attack would follow, completely grasping the timing of his ability to activate. If this grasp of the rhythm of the battle only surprised Kron, then the series of attacks launched by the young man really shocked him. Fists and feet were accompanied by fire, ice, lightning, and these were just the most basic. Sometimes when the opponent's fists collided with his, he could feel more than a dozen forces of different natures, twisting, rushing, shaking, or bumping, constantly attacking his body. If it weren't for the powerful mind, this kind of attack would be enough to kill him with one punch. In addition to these, there is also the ability to suddenly disappear, and you can only feel the existence of the opponent after being attacked. The sharp air blade released from the fingers can also be slid away when it attacks the body. There was even one time when Kron finally hit the opponent's heart, but he found that the opponent's was instantly covered with a layer of gold. The huge force hit it, but only made a metal collision sound. The young man still looked unharmed. There was another loud noise, and Kron stood still, while the young man in white took more than 10 steps back. The last step was taken backwards, and the violent power was released, directly blasting a big hole in the ground behind him, and countless buildings and forests began to collapse. Kron took a few breaths. With his indestructible power, he had not encountered such a high-intensity close combat for a long time. He looked at the young man in front of him with a serious face. He asked, "Pagan, who are you? With your strength, you can never be an unknown person. My name is meaningless in this era, so let's continue this battle." "Whatever you want," Kron sneered, "you do have a lot of tricks, but quantity can never defeat quality. Do you know how powerful the rotation of the planet is?" After saying this, Kron shouted and punched the ground under his feet. At this moment, the terrifying power was transmitted from his arm, which shocked the young man who had always been calm. This was a punch driven entirely by power, because it was pure. So powerful. A punch that was enough to shake the world landed gently on the ground. Boom! A huge cloud of dust rose from the ground, and the square under the feet of the two was smashed to pieces at the first time, and the earth was torn apart. Several cracks several kilometers long spread out in all directions with Kron as the origin. The earth was collapsing, and the buildings collapsed. Trees, grass, and stones were rushed into the sky by the huge force, and the violent shock spread for more than 100 kilometers, causing panic throughout Kyoto. After this blow that changed the natural landscape, the original square had already turned into a meteorite crater more than 5 meters deep and more than 100 meters in diameter. A huge mushroom cloud was slowly rising, leaving only Kron, ragged and standing there expressionlessly. But this punch, which was equivalent to a small nuclear bomb explosion, still couldn't do anything to his opponent. The young man looked at the broken appearance around him, and finally showed a hint of excitement. There was a white light shield around his body. When the shock wave was small, it was like a glass cover, shattered all over the ground. "Very good, you are now qualified to know my name. Bai Xing, remember my name. Because he represents the strongest." Jane only felt his eyes blink, and the warrior had rushed in front of him, and the knife light slashed down like lightning. But facing all this, Jane only felt bored. Because of her ability, she never had to worry about being attacked. She didn't even look at the other party's blade, and just grabbed it with empty hands. It looked like putting a hand into a meat grinder. But when the blade touched Jane's palm, she finally showed a puzzled look. The blade directly crossed her 4 fingers and cut them all off. So the puzzlement turned into fear. What's going on? Why didn't the ability start? Jane felt that not only the ability, but even the mind in the body seemed to disappear. Just when he hesitated, the blade turned around her arm, and a sharp pain came, and Jane's entire right hand had turned into minced meat. "Did you do it? What happened? Why can't I activate my ability?" Looking at Jian's desperate and helpless look, Xinjun smiled disdainfully. "You people with abilities completely regard your abilities as indispensable things. Once you lose your abilities, you always make such a fuss." After saying this, the long sword in Xinjun's hand slashed out again, and the next moment he was about to chop off Jian's head. Just at this moment, there was a huge shock from the ground, and the amplitude of the shock was so large that it was as if hundreds of kilograms of explosives exploded under the feet of the two people. Then a burst of smoke and dust came from behind Xinjun, completely submerging the bodies of the two people. Feeling the blade fall, Xinjun snorted coldly, took a step forward, and slashed again. An hour later, on the East China Sea, the battle was in full swing. Human war weapons once again showed their ferocious claws and fangs, showing a power that creatures in nature could never match. Dong Jiang's fleet relied on its tenacious combat capability to fight with Daxia's aircraft carrier fleet until now. Daxia's aircraft carrier fleet, with weapons that surpassed the opponent, still had the upper hand. But even so far, only half of the opponent's military force has been destroyed. Li Anping stood on the flight deck of the aircraft carrier with his hands folded across his chest. Yang Guang on the side said, "Sir, this place is too easy to be attacked. Please go back to the command room to watch this battle." Watch? What's there to appreciate? Li Anping only felt that his heart was getting more and more anxious. From the direction of Dong Yang, a breath that made him feel disgusted kept coming. No matter what it was, Li Anping wanted to tear it apart immediately and crush the opponent. Li Anping's question made Yang Guang speechless. Then he heard Li Anping continue, "I've seen enough. You have wasted too much of my time. Let me take care of the following things." To be continued. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Lango. Chapter 248. Sir, I am incompetent. Hearing Li Anping's words, Yang Guang half knelt on the ground with a look of panic. Li Anping did not speak. He then took the special headset handed to him by Xiao Suesu and plugged it into his ears. The next moment, he jumped lightly and appeared in the air dozens of meters high. Then there was a bang under his feet, and the whole person disappeared, leaving only a series of white air waves. On the battlefield, everyone's attention was instantly attracted by Li Anping's actions. In the command room of the Heilong, Li Shan looked at the after-image left on the high-speed camera and said in disbelief, "What is that? I don't know, but his speed has exceeded 1,000 meters per second, and he will rush into Dongjiang's warships in 10 seconds. But before he finished speaking, a terrible loud noise came from afar. Li Anping's speed instantly exceeded 2,000 meters per second, like a meteor, leaving a vacuum corridor in the night sky, and then crashed into a battleship. Look, sir. The big screen in the command room showed the image taken by the reconnaissance aircraft. A giant battleship nearly 300 meters long was directly smashed into two pieces. Various explosions and flames kept lighting up on its two halves. Then a man wrapped in white cloud slowly floated up from the inside of the battleship. It's Lord Li Anping. Did he destroy a battleship with his bare hands? What does he want to do? Li Anping suddenly landed and grabbed the upper half of the battleship with one hand. At this moment, dozens of Dongyang Navy soldiers suddenly rushed over. Facing Li Anping's natural disaster-like attack, they did not collapse. They held machine guns and pistols and kept shooting at Li Anping, who was landing. Although these soldiers were obviously abnormally calm and rational. But no matter what, it was difficult for them to rewrite the fate of defeat. Facing their attacks, Li Anping ignored them. He just grabbed the deck of the upper half of the battleship with his palm and shouted softly. The next moment, the huge battleship was directly grabbed by him under the influence of his huge force and the void force field. In the command room, it was completely quiet at this moment. They watched Li Anping grab the half battleship weighing tens of thousands of tons. Then he threw it towards another battleship hundreds of meters away like throwing garbage. No matter which country's navy, it has never encountered such an extremely childish but also extremely terrifying attack. It's just like a kindergarten child throwing a toy. In the terrible whistling sound, everyone watched the half battleship fall towards another battleship with endless flames, explosions, and power. The next second, the two behemoths collided with each other, and the earth-shaking explosion directly set off a huge wave tens of meters high on the sea. The soldiers on the battleships could only struggle in the flames and huge waves, just like ants. Randomly crushed to death. Everyone in the command room felt as if they had come to the mythical age. Li Anping in the camera seemed to dislike the slow efficiency of such an attack, so he pulled out a long sword made of adamantium alloy from his waist. A terrible gas explosion occurred on the spot. Li Anping's figure had disappeared. As the reconnaissance plane's camera moved quickly, one could only see that one warship after another was destroyed into a pile of scrap metal. Some warships were directly cut into two pieces, and some warships were directly detonated and turned into countless fragments. Other warships were hit by a huge force. It was like a huge hammer hitting his hull. At first, it was a circular concave, and then the concave damage spread in waves. Until this damage affected the entire warship, the entire hull began to separate and disintegrate. From beginning to end, Li Anping simply sprinted, hit, swung his sword, and punched. Four extremely simple actions, in Li Anping's hands, showed a destructive power like a god. Machine guns, anti-aircraft guns, fish, missiles, nothing can hit Li Anping. Even if it hits, it doesn't matter. And Li Anping can destroy warships with one punch and one kick. In just 2 minutes, the entire Dongyang Navy fleet has turned into a piece of steel residue on the sea. The Dongyang Navy, which was as tenacious as a cockroach a moment ago, was easily popped by Li Anping at this moment like a soap bubble. Li Anping's simple raid was a huge impact on both the Dongyang Navy and Li Shan's aircraft carrier formation. The scene of easily destroying a country's naval force with one person's strength was firmly remembered in their hearts. The common sense of war was completely broken. Faced with this obviously out of specification force, even Captain Li Shan began to doubt the significance of the existence of his aircraft carrier formation. The combat effectiveness shown by Li Anping is just like a god. And more ordinary naval soldiers in Daxia simply cannot understand what they see. They could only see one warship after another turning into fireballs and ruins on the sea, and could only see one dot after another disappearing on the radar. Unlike the images sent by the reconnaissance aircraft in the command room, they had no idea what was going on. Why did the enemy's battleship explode? Why was the hundreds of meters long ship cut into two? What exactly was going on? Although Yang Guang, Xiao Suesu, and others who were also ability users were standing on the deck, they did not see with their own eyes what Li Anping did. But they didn't look puzzled at all. There was only excitement, shock, and excitement in their eyes. Claudia rushed onto the deck regardless of the soldiers' obstruction. Looking at the fire shooting into the sky in the distance, she shouted to Yang Guang, "What's going on? Why did there be so many explosions just now?" After saying this, she turned to Yang Guang. He looked around. Where is Li Anping? Where has he gone? Yang Guang looked at the north with emotion on his face. "My lord, he went directly to Kyoto." In the cave of Mount Fuji, the leader was still sitting cross-legged, but his eyes were full of horror. This monster! Even if I control those Navy soldiers and remove their fear, there is no way I can be his opponent. Then he used the function of the phase matrix and said to Shinjun in the distance, "Shinjun, that monster is coming directly towards Kyoto." His speed, damn, he is now rushing towards Kyoto at a speed exceeding Mach 7. Still accelerating. I don't know where his destination is, but it is obvious that he seems to have noticed something. If you don't want to die, just finish it quickly. Shinjun frowned and said, "I know." To be continued. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Xiong Go. Chapter 249. In front of Shinjun, there is something like a window, just like a display screen, showing the steel ruins on the East China Sea. Jane, who was standing by, had regained her composure at this time, and took out the hemostatic spray from her combat uniform and sprayed it on the wound. Since a person with the ability awakened, she has been using her ability for more than 10 years or even decades, and the ability has long become a part of her body. Especially for a person with the ability like Jane, who has been wandering on various battlefields for many years, the ability has become the support of her life. It is conceivable how much of a blow it was to her after she found that she could not use her ability. It was like a peerless swordsman suddenly found that his hand was chopped off before the duel. Being able to regain composure so quickly also shows her strong psychological quality and mental tenacity. While bandaging the wound, Jane looked at Shinjun from time to time, and then at the window in front of Shinjun, thinking in her heart, the ability, the mind, all can't be activated, but from the opponent's attack just now, he also did not use the ability and the mind, just pure muscle strength. Or he has activated the ability, and his ability is to make others lose their abilities. Just as Jian was thinking about the countermeasures at hand, Shinjun said to the window in front of him, "Did you see it?" In 2 minutes, the entire Dongyang fleet was destroyed by Li Enping. Under the unclear situation, Jian was also happy that the other party delayed time, giving himself more time to think, and said, "Li Enping? Are you saying that this window shows that Li Enping destroyed a fleet of warships?" Shinjun said casually, "In the phase matrix, front and back, left and right, up and down, high and low, far and near, all are given new concepts, even far away places can be seen instantly. During the time we are talking, this video should have been transmitted to Dongyang. Even all over the world. Why do you do this?" Shinjun smiled. Li Enping led the Daxia army to invade Dongyang, destroyed the navy, and attacked Kyoto. We killed him. Isn't it a perfect story? You went to so much trouble just to frame him for the Kyoto incident. Shinjun shook his head. One hand swept across the window in front of him, and the entire window disappeared into the air. You won't understand. Shinjun looked at Jane with a pitying look and said, "The time has come. Aren't you surprised that I suddenly chatted with you? You have already lost your last chance just now." What time? After saying this, Jane felt a sharp pain in her chest and heart, and then she screamed and couldn't help spitting a mouthful of blood on the ground. Samurai sword. Slashing, wound on the right hand, these things flashed through her mind one after another. She looked at Shinjun angrily and said, "Is your sword poisonous?" "Specially refined radioactive toxin, as the blood flows, it will completely destroy the structure of your protein, and there is no medicine to cure it," as he said. Shinjun walked towards Jian, who was vomiting blood. "Modern medicine has no way to treat it. Maybe some people with healing abilities can treat it, but you may not find such people now." Jane looked at Shinjun, who was walking slowly with a ferocious expression, and said hatefully, "Don't you have any honor of a strong man? Sorry, to achieve the goal, do whatever it takes. This is my life creed. It is also the fighting spirit of our nation. I was taught this way since I was a child. Your accusation is like a child's play to me." As he said, Shinjun stood in front of Jian and said lightly, "In order to prevent the bodies of people with abilities above level 4 from being obtained by other organizations, the Virtual Number Agency has installed a self-destruct device on the combat uniform of each high-level ability user. In addition to self-destruction when the heart stops beating, it can also be activated automatically." Jane's expression changed. In fact, at least half of her anger and weakness were pretended. She just hoped to lead Shinjun to her and die with him. Because the ability of the man in front of him is too terrible. Once he gets close, I am afraid that all level 5 ability users will have no resistance. Seeing the change in Jane's expression, Shinjun smiled faintly, and then put the samurai sword in his hand back into the scabbard at his waist. Then he stretched out his hand and grabbed it, and another samurai sword suddenly appeared, as if it was summoned from nothingness, and came directly into Shinjun's hand. Jane was shocked, Is this some kind of ability? Is the previous guess that he can't use his ability wrong? He can use his ability, but he can restrict others from using their abilities. Or is this related to the phase matrix he just mentioned? Just when she thought of this, her limbs suddenly went numb, and the whole person fell to the ground. She was anxious in her heart, but she couldn't feel any strength in her body, and she couldn't even move, and even her consciousness began to become drowsy. Shinjun saw that the toxin had taken effect again, but he was not anxious in his heart. He just grabbed the new samurai sword in his hand and looked at Jane in front of him quietly. The radioactive toxin applied on his previous samurai sword would only make people completely incapable of action at first, and it would take 2 days to really kill people. As time passed, 2 minutes later, Jane's pupils slightly dilated, and her brain began to gradually lose consciousness and fell into a coma. Until this time, Shinjun did not give up caution, but waited carefully for another 3 or 4 minutes, until the other party's head tilted and completely lost consciousness, and then walked towards Jane step by step. After confirming that Jane was really unconscious, Shinjun pointed the samurai sword in his hand at Jane's brain. With a swish, the samurai sword was quickly inserted into the opponent's brain. But it was like inserting a phantom, and the tip of the sword disappeared in Jian's head. However, there was no wound or blood at the collision between the blade and the forehead. Until this time, Shinjun showed a slight smile at the corner of his mouth. I will accept your ability. The next moment, the mind energy like the Yangtze River surged out of Jian's brain, and then all was sucked into the samurai sword in Shinjun's hand. As the mind energy increased, the whole samurai sword emitted a dazzling light. This violent force directly set off a terrifying hurricane, blowing towards the surroundings. It seemed that even the atmosphere was whistling uneasy. It was not until 5 minutes later that the surge of mind energy gradually disappeared, and the storm stopped raging. Looking at the samurai sword that had returned to its ordinary state, Shinjun showed a satisfied smile on his face. He waved the knife in his hand a few times, feeling the new power, and said, "Doctor, are you there?" A voice came from the air, "Yes." "How long will it take for Li Anping to arrive?" "He has arrived in Kyoto. He is heading towards the leader. It seems that he has indeed noticed something. Stop him and send everyone else to me." The doctor said helplessly, "I will try my best. He is too fast. Even if I keep using the space maze and reverse the direction, I can't trap him for long." "Wait, you said to send everyone here? Isn't it too anxious?" The new king showed a confident smile on his face. "Who made our protagonist so impatient to appear so early? I can only speed up." At the same time, the entire Dongyang border was full of news of war, invasion, and Li Anping's attack. Panic and fear filled the crowd. The strange thing is that the entire Dongyang government seemed to have disappeared completely. No policies were conveyed, and there was no action to appease the people. Local governments can only find ways to appease the people, but without sufficient force and power, their actions have little effect. In the capital, a samurai in a white uniform slowly put the bloody samurai sword in his hand back into the scabbard. At his feet were dozens of officials' bodies. The same situation happened to the top government officials in Dongyang. Almost at the same time, they were all controlled or killed directly by the ability users of the Divine Realm. The whole Dongyang fell into chaos, and with the news constantly broadcast on TV and the internet, everyone knew that the Dongyang Navy had been completely destroyed and Kyoto had been occupied by the enemy. The Divine Realm was like an invisible big hand, pushing the whole Dongyang into panic. In the cave of Mount Fuji, the leader's face was full of excitement. With the help of various news, he used the catalysis of his ability, and the whole Dongyang was full of panic. Anger, fear, and resentment. Some people were afraid of the invasion of the Daxia army, some were angry at the invasion of the other side, and angry at Li Anping's cruelty. More people are afraid of being involved in the war, resenting the government and society. Under the instigation of the leader's ability, the tiny emotions are magnified, and the words become actual actions. So the chaos is getting bigger and bigger, and all kinds of negative emotions are increasing. Resentment, fear, anger. All the negative emotions are collected and passed to the leader's feet. A power that can destroy the world is slowly awakening. The more he feels the huge power of the country's emotions, the more excited the leader is. Without his fifth energy level ability, without the help of the phase matrix, and without the support of the power under his feet, he would never be able to do such a thing, and he would never experience this godlike perspective. Hurry up! Hurry up! It's about to succeed, and a new era is coming. The leader is like a cultist, and he murmurs neurotically, the true God is coming. All those who betray God will be judged in the end. Emma hid in a tree hole to rest. Since the whole Kyoto changed its appearance, Samael has never appeared again. The other party seemed to have lost the means to track him because of this great change. While resting to recover his strength, Emma thought, what happened? Samael didn't come to chase me. I wonder how Hansen and the others are doing. After resting for a while, Emma felt that her physical strength and mental energy had recovered by more than half, so she wanted to get out quickly. After all, Samael was too dangerous. If he met Hansen and Takuchi Aoda would have no resistance. Thinking of this, Emma stood up and stepped out of the tree hole. But it was such a simple step, and the whole world seemed to change in an instant. This feeling Emma was very familiar with. Space teleportation? But I don't have the ability to use it? While thinking this, Emma looked around and immediately became alert. The place where she was standing now seemed to be on the playground of a university. And Samael also appeared more than 50 meters in front of her. But at this time, he looked around and seemed to be very confused. When he saw Emma, he immediately became alert. On Emma's left, there were Hansen, Takuchi Sita, and another young man whom Emma did not know. Opposite them, on Emma's right, was a young man with a heroic appearance. At this moment, the young man was holding the neck of a big man. The big man seemed to be in a semi-comatose state. His whole body looked bloody and mixed with countless steel fragments. It seemed to be part of some kind of armor. And in the center of everyone, a long-haired man holding a samurai sword was standing there with a smile. Man at the top of the food chain. Author, Seong Lang-go. Chapter 250. Western Continent, above the border of the Code Country. At an altitude of 10,000 meters above the ground, a warship with a total length of more than 1.5 kilometers, a rectangular appearance, and a pure black surface is suspended here. This is the Star Alliance's aerial fortress, the Ark. At this moment, the Queen of Heaven is wearing a white gauze skirt, like a goddess in ancient mythology, sitting in the main seat of a conference room, and the 3D projection in front of her is playing various news about Dongyang and Li Enping. Solomon on the side asked, "Leader, do we really not need to participate in Dongyang's affairs this time?" The Queen of Heaven said lightly, "No, let these Orientals and the imaginary number agency, the Annihilation Abyss, fight each other. While they are constantly consuming power, we will become stronger and stronger at a speed beyond their imagination." At this time, the news screen on the TV was playing Li Enping's speech on TV. Under the huge close-up, a few words were written in the common language of the Federation of the Western Continent. The tyrant of Daxia, the butcher of the East. A loud bang was heard in the sky, like thunder. The cloud layer had been split in two by a straight line, leaving only a white wave of air several kilometers long. It was difficult to see what was flying past with the naked eye. Li Enping flew across the border, the sea, and the land. It took him only more than 5 minutes to arrive in Kyoto. Li Enping, who was suspended in mid-air, looked at his feet. There were trees, rocks, and various man-made buildings everywhere. Kyoto's original appearance was completely unrecognizable. In the center of the entire city, A huge extinct volcano stood there. The top of the mountain was completely covered with white snow. Li Anping murmured, "Mount Fuji." He felt that the breath that had been making him feel irritable since the beginning came from the depths of Mount Fuji. Although it was strange why Kyoto became like this. But the powerful force made Li Anping fearless. With a cold snort, Li Anping had accelerated again, like a meteor across the sky, flying towards Mount Fuji. But after flying for more than 20 seconds, Li Anping suddenly stopped. He turned around and showed a strange expression. He didn't know when Mount Fuji appeared behind Li Anping. Is it an illusion? Li Anping shook his head. No, is it some kind of space transfer? Did I turn my direction unconsciously? Thinking of this, Li Anping suddenly pointed his palm towards Mount Fuji in the distance. It's about 10 kilometers away. He calculated the distance and angle between himself and Mount Fuji in his mind. The next moment, Li Anping's palm brought up a residual image and hit the distant mountains through the air. Huge power, the skill of using the empty palm, plus the powerful control of the void force field on the airflow. With each palm push of Li Anping, a white shock wave formed by airflow blasted towards Mount Fuji. In a blink of an eye, more than a dozen shock waves have been shot out from Li Anping's palm. Across a distance of more than 10 kilometers, it blasted towards Mount Fuji. The white shock wave spanned the entire sky, and with brutal force, it hit the mountain fiercely. A huge explosion and vibration came from Mount Fuji, bringing a large wave of smoke and dust. Each shock wave from Li Anping was enough to destroy a bunker. After more than a dozen consecutive blasts, many potholes appeared on Mount Fuji with the naked eye. But Li Anping sneered. His attack was originally intended to test how the opponent could unconsciously divert his direction. Was it a spatial conversion, or something else? Unexpectedly, the opponent simply did not make any move and let his shockwave bomb Mount Fuji. So what about this? Li Anping raised one hand above his head, and the air within thousands of square meters was forcibly pulled over by the void force field. The air was forcibly gathered in his palm and turned into a sphere with a radius of more than 10 meters. However, this was just the beginning. Under the compression of the void force field, the sphere composed of the atmosphere was still being compressed. As the volume of the sphere gets smaller and smaller, the internal energy contained in it becomes more and more terrifying. When this milky white air bomb shrinks to the size of Li Anping's palm, in the distance, the doctor hiding in a basement couldn't help but sweat. So much air is compressed thousands of times, the high temperature generated by the internal energy, plus the shock wave generated by the expansion of the gas. If he throws it casually, I really don't know what Mount Fuji will become. This thing is completely a spirit bomb. After complaining, the doctor contacted Xinjun. Are you sure this monster hasn't awakened all his abilities? I think he is invincible with his brute force alone. Even the Emperor can't compete with him head on. Don't worry. Xinjun sent back the sentence. At this moment, Li Anping had thrown the air bomb in his hand like a baseball. Because the air bomb will immediately expand and explode after it breaks away from the constraints of the void force field, so in order to hit the target at a long distance, Li Anping must use a strong force to throw it out. The air bomb in mid-air just left Li Anping's right hand and began to expand. However, relying on Li Anping's great strength, he was also rapidly approaching Mount Fuji while expanding and exploding. To the naked eye, it was just a white meteor, expanding and growing while flying towards the distance. It gave people the feeling that it was an enhanced version of the previous shock wave. The air bomb expanded and exploded, destroying all the buildings, streets, trees, and rocks in its path, leaving a long vacuum zone and only a scorched earth on the ground. But the next moment, the entire air bomb disappeared. A loud noise came from the sky, and the terrible explosion broke the clouds in the sky, creating a huge hole with a radius of hundreds of meters. Although the air bomb did not work and was transferred to the high altitude, it made Li Anping understand the opponent's means. It is indeed a space-type ability, but it is not a teleportation, but a method similar to changing the structure of space. After thinking about it, Li Anping accelerated and flew towards Mount Fuji again. With the hypersonic speed of his body, although he would retreat a distance every time he advanced a distance due to changes in direction, distance, and position, he was still moving forward in general. Because although the doctor could change Li Anping's position by changing the spatial structure in the phase matrix, Li Anping's speed was too fast. Every time he advanced 1 kilometer, the doctor pulled him back half a kilometer, but the next moment, Li Anping advanced another kilometer. As long as Li Anping kept moving at full speed and kept turning, it would be extremely difficult for the doctor to lock onto his position. After finally pulling him back, he ran away again in the blink of an eye. So although the doctor could delay Li Anping, he could not stop the other party from approaching Mount Fuji little by little. Damn it, Xinjun, if you don't think of a way, Li Anping will break through. At this moment, Li Anping suddenly stopped on his own initiative, tilted his head, and seemed to be listening to something. The next moment, Li Anping turned his head directly, and his eyes were fixed on the place where Xinjun was currently. He heard your voices, damn, he rushed over. 10 minutes ago, at the location where Xinjun was, he saw him pull out the samurai sword from his waist with his left hand, holding a samurai sword in each hand, and then he looked at Qinyi and said directly, take him away. Qinyi nodded, and directly cut Takuchi Kingta's neck with the palm, knocking Takuchi Kingta unconscious. Hansen was furious when he saw this. Although he wanted to move, his injury was too severe. He felt a series of severe pains when he moved slightly, and he watched Qinyi leave with Takuchi Aota on his back. Qinyi at this moment showed a physical fitness far beyond his previous one. He was seen carrying Takuchi Aota on his back, still walking briskly, and disappeared quickly into the surrounding woods in the way of ordinary people running a 100-meter race. At this time, because the doctor focused all his attention on hindering Li Anping, he did not use the phase matrix to help Qinyi leave. But Hansen felt even more strange that Emma did not intercept the two people from beginning to end. He turned his head and looked. He didn't know when Emma's face became very ugly. On the other side, Samael casually wore a mask on his face and could not see his expression, but he had not moved since he appeared, and it seemed that something was wrong.